Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Unfound Now, where I take a look at a recent disappearance. We're coming up on 5 years of doing this monthly series. For this end of May, beginning of June episode, I'm going to be taking a look at the disappearance of Alisa Petrov, Petrov, from Salt Lake City, Utah, on April 21st of 2025. She is 15 years old, and this is a disappearance that I was requested to do by a listener. Actually, the person didn't necessarily request it. This person alerted me to Alisa's disappearance just a couple days ago, and I thought that this would make a good Unfound Now. So that's what I'm going to do. As a reminder, I think I bring this up every episode. I do these Unfound Nows for three main reasons. First of all, learning. Second of all, publicity. And third of all, I think it might be interesting to hear how I myself read missing persons news, the kind of the between the lines type of items that maybe most other people are not going to notice. And maybe you'd like to develop that skill as well. Now, with all of these so far after 5 years, I always bring some learning points to the discussion. And the three for today are, number one, not my expertise. Number two, legally versus realistically. And number three, what to do now. I'm going to now read, of course, as you would guess, with a 15-year-old who goes missing, there have been several articles that have been written about Alisa's disappearance, and of course, she is still missing here as of June 1st of 2025. There are many articles that you can find out there. I just picked out one that is very recent, from just a couple days ago, I think, to encapsulate what actually went on here. And I'm going to read that article right now, and then I'm going to make a couple comments on it, and then we'll come back to these three learning points. But before I do that, please give this video a thumbs up. Please consider supporting Unfound at patreon.com or hitting the join button below here on YouTube. Join the discussion group on Facebook, like the page on Facebook. Also follow Unfound on Instagram and Twitter. All right, let's get to that article. This is a May 30th, 2025 article, and it comes to us from South Jordan, Utah. A third man has been charged as part of the investigation into a missing and endangered 15-year-old South Jordan girl. But like the other two, Samuel Tinka Mitchell, 41 of Harriman, is not charged with any crimes directly related to the girl's disappearance. Mitchell was charged Friday in the 3rd District Court with 5 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor, a second-degree felony, and enticement of a minor, a Class A misdemeanor. He is accused of engaging in sexually explicit conversations online with 15-year-old Alisa Petrov before she ran away from home. She has not been seen since April 21st, so almost 45 days ago. Mitchell confirmed that he had been speaking with Alisa and admitted to having planned to meet up with her, but canceled due to illness. While investigating Mitchell, law enforcers discovered he had been communicating with a second 15-year-old girl, the charges state. Investigators also found multiple files of child sex abuse material, colloquially referred to as child pornography, on his phone. Police say Alisa was dropped off by her mother at school at 9:30 a.m. on April 21st. The juvenile never went to class and was later located on security cameras at a nearby gas station. She was later given a ride by an unknown male to a UTA track station in American Fork, kind of like a commuter train, something like that, where she traveled to Provo, Utah, which is south of Salt Lake. She was last seen on surveillance footage in Provo on foot, according to several search warrant affidavits. While searching her room, police reported finding an iPad hidden in her dresser and discovered she had been messaging multiple people. On May 12th, so approximately 20 days ago, William Taylor Glines, 37, of Texas City, Texas, was charged in 4th District Court with 2 counts of aggravated sexual exploitation of a minor and 2 counts of attempted aggravated sexual exploitation of a minor, first-degree offenses, or first-degree felonies. 2 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor, a second-degree felony, plus enticement of a minor, and 3 counts of criminal solicitation, a Class A misdemeanor. Then the third man, Matthew Nichols Menard, Menard, 35, of Miami, Florida, was charged in Utah's 4th District Court with 2 counts of aggravated sexual exploitation of a minor. That was me clearing my throat. That was not too stress a point. A first-degree felony, plus enticing a minor, and 3 counts of criminal solicitation, Class A misdemeanors. He surrendered to South Jordan police on Wednesday and was booked into the Salt Lake County Jail. Police believe both men were communicating with Alisa before she disappeared. Alisa remained missing as of Friday, May 30th. Police believe she had asked multiple people to help her get to Las Vegas, where it is believed she was trying to meet up with people she met online. Her family is offering a $20,000 reward for information leading to her return. So before I go on and get into those 3 learning points, there are some points that really need to be understood here. Important, none of these men were in Provo at the time. So she was last seen, as I read in the article, walking the streets of Provo, Utah. At least to this point, these 3 men mentioned in this article, no proof they were there, that they ever met up with her. Also, it's important to note that at the time of her disappearance, none of these men were in Las Vegas either. And in fact, like I said, there are multiple articles, but in several of them, and then if you want to go on Web Sleuths as well, it says that at least one of these guys, as it says, was going to meet her in Las Vegas, but that wasn't supposed to happen until late May. Here she goes missing like a month before that. It's important to understand that. And also what's important for people who have seen these conversations, none of these men were pretending to be 15-year-olds or underage boys or girls. It's clear from the conversations that Alisa knew these men were adults. This is all, I think, important to understand for this particular disappearance. We hear a lot about, of course, adults going on pretending to be 50-year-olds, come meet me, and then the child shows up, and of course it's an adult. That's not what was going on here. Important to understand, and I'll get into couple other important items as I get into the 3 learning points, which I'm going to do right now. Okay, learning point number 1, not my area of expertise. This mainly has to do with the podcast that comes out every Friday. I would never say that I actively avoid them. Disappearances of people under 18, I just am not very inclined to actively reach out. If a family member contacts me and says, hey, my 10-year-old is missing or went missing 10 years ago, then I'll talk to anybody. But when it comes to reaching out to families, it has to be certain situations. Now, if you're wondering, well, if Alisa's disappearance gets to be a year old, then is this the kind you would consider covering on Unfound? I would say that if the facts don't change too much, then I would say yes. But I also want you to all understand why I don't do a lot of reaching out when it comes to child disappearances in general. Most importantly, as a reporter, podcasting is just a very specific form of reporting. But as a reporter, I like to know if I can trust my guest. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every guest on every episode since 2016 has told the truth on every specific topic. I'm not going to sit here and do that. But I am going to tell you I actively avoid people who I think aren't going to tell the truth. And when it comes to child disappearances, a lot of well-known ones that we all know about, whether it has to do with, I'm not going to name, I shouldn't name any names, but we know a lot of child disappearances where we're not sure that we can trust the adults around that child or those children. And so if you can't trust the adults around the kids, then there's not really anybody to interview. I don't want to get put in a situation where I interview somebody and then down the road, that was the actual person who caused the disappearance. Of course, ruling out, we can't forget Steve Pankey. I guess that would be an exception. But I just don't want to do that. So this is one of the reasons I don't reach out regarding child disappearances. And when I say child, I mean human beings under the age of 18. But I'm going to get into that whole age range thing here in a bit. That's one of the reasons. The other reason is another main reason is because I'm not a parent. And just in my everyday life, outside of covering disappearances and having ideas about them and theories about them and speaking at schools about them and everything else, I like to stay out of the parenting of other, of people's kids. I'm not one to criticize a parent in person. Hey, you shouldn't be letting your kid do that. I stay away from that with my siblings. Of course, my sister Diane has a son who's in his 40s now, so I don't know how relevant that is, but still. And then my brother Brian has 2 kids, and then their kids have kids. I stay out of all of it. Because I haven't been a parent, I can at least say that if I were a parent, would I really want somebody who doesn't have any kids parenting, criticizing how I am parenting my child or children? Just stay out of it. So when it comes to the disappearances, I kind of bring that into this in that I don't want to get to a point where I'm interviewing somebody and I'm sounding like an adulting expert. I am a disappearance expert. I'm not being an adult expert or being a parent expert. Sometimes I'm not good at being an adult either, but you know what I'm saying here. That I don't want to get caught up in that. In an interview coming across as telling a person how to parent his or her child. So those are the 2 big reasons that I stay away from it. Also, to a lesser extent, I always have to be open to the idea, as weird as this may be and as unusual as this may be, it very well could be some of the reason if it's the idea that the child ran away. Maybe that child ran away for good reasons. So there's that. I realize the odds of a 14-year-old going out into the world and pulling off their own disappearance and changing their name and growing to be 90 years old is pretty unlikely. But I also, in my capacity as a podcast host, as a reporter, I have to make sure that I'm not facilitating the capture of somebody who maybe it's in that child's best interest or even adult's best interest to not be in the situation that they were in. That's also an important consideration for the work that I do, something that I consider before making a disappearance an episode, whether on the regular Friday podcast or on this series. And in fact, my belief is that too many people out there with YouTube channels and everything else don't do enough checking of themselves before commenting. Whether it has to do with being, criticizing parents, or maybe just being too overtly eager to cover a disappearance, even though there may be reasons to think, I think this person ran off because they were in a very abusive situation. I'm telling you all of this because this is what I bring to me covering Alisa's disappearance. There have to be certain circumstances for it to fit into my criteria to even talk about it publicly. But I also would say that when it does come, having listened to quite a few shows over the years where the coverage of children, the disappearance of children is the topic, many people on the other side go too lightly on the topic because they're parents. So here I am, not wanting to comment because I'm not a parent, but I gotten the feeling many times where hosts are parents and thus they go easy on parents. That's just as bad to me. When you're not a parent and you're trying to parent other people's kids, that's bad. And when you're a parent in a situation like a reporter and you go too easy on parents, that's equally as bad in my book. So just keep that in mind. But I think for the rest of this, you're going to hear why I avoid this topic. But I decided to do this with Alisa's disappearance. And it's not all about me, but I just want all of you to know that I come to this topic having really thought about it before turning on the microphone. So let's go on to point number 2. All right, point number 2, realistically versus legally. What do I mean by that? What I mean is when we're trying to solve this type of disappearance, so we're not talking about the disappearance of a 5-year-old. We're talking about the disappearance of a teenager who knows how the world works. We can't afford to treat these, although they are children, older children, like babes in the woods. They know a lot more about a lot more things than we as adults realize. And that has to do with, yes, things about sex and then all the other stuff of finding a hotel room and everything else, getting on a bus. These kids can figure these things out. 5-year-olds can't. This is why, at least from a disappearance analysis point of view, it's not constructive to put all children, when I say children under the age of 18, at least in the United States, in the same category. This is what I mean by realistically versus legally. Legally, in the United States, everyone under the age of 18, it's like they're all the same age. They do something wrong, all the same age, no matter if they're 5 years old or 14-year-olds. Realistically, we know that's not the case. I don't know, for example, if a 4-year-old can form get the thought, I want to murder somebody. But you know who can? A 15-year-old. Yet in the eyes of the law, generally, they're seen as being the same. Whereas with many things, the way the mind works, even though I admit at 15-year-olds, the brain is not totally formed. The fact is, the brain of a 15-year-old has more in common with a 40-year-old than a 5-year-old. That legally, we treat that 15-year-old like a 5-year-old. And this is a mistake. And this is what I mean by realistically versus legally. What I'm saying is Alisa was a willing participant in this realistically, not legally. And this is important to understand when we start thinking about, well, how are we going to solve this disappearance? And that's my biggest concern right now. In fact, and this goes back to point number one of, really, for the most part, I try to avoid this stuff. But if I'm going to talk about it, I got to talk about it truthfully. That my insight, too many parents out there do think that their 15-year-olds are babes in the woods, and this is how this stuff ends up happening. My son, my daughter would never do that. My son, my daughter would never communicate with an adult online and talk about these things. My son and daughter, my son and daughter, my son or daughter would never do this. And guess what? That's exactly what these kids are doing. This is no different. Now, on top of that, should this happen, once again, my insight versus, once again, realistically versus legally, I will just take it back to when I was a kid. You know, as I've said sometimes, I was given a lot of free time. Time on my own, although I had a very structured life as a teenager. My parents had me involved in a lot of activities, but I had a lot of alone time too, being raised as an only child. Getting on my motorcycle, going out, riding the back roads of Gilpin Township, Armstrong County in Pennsylvania. Hours and hours and hours. I burned through so much gasoline, you can't even believe it. But here's what I also know, and this is one more of my insights about parenting and why I think this stuff happens. Let's say back in 1985 that I was riding around on my motorcycle and some guy stopped me and wanted to show me some Playboy magazines. Of course, being 15-year-olds, not legal to buy Playboy magazines. I'm not supposed to be seeing Playboy magazines, nothing. All right, I'm not supposed to be doing that. But here's what I know. At 15 years old, I like the pictures of nude women. There you go. I've said it. Just like I think any 15-year-old boy, straight boy, would be. That's not unusual. But here's what I also know. Had I gotten caught doing that, and had this guy been caught doing this for me, showing me this stuff, and hey, stop over and you can look at my Playboy and Penthouse magazines, my parents, you know what they would have said? They would have just been as angry with me as they would be with that guy. Ed, you're not supposed to be doing that. Don't you know that? Whereas I'm not sure how many parents are like that. Instead, my insight is that too many just want to blame. How dare you lure my child into looking at Playboy magazines? How dare you? Not processing that, you know what? I think that my son was instrumental in this as well. And he knew he shouldn't be doing that, but was doing it anyway. If we do not treat children this way, they will never learn responsibility. If we're always going to give them outs because they're underage and everything, that is something that they will take into adulthood. And I will tell you that the reason I am the way I am now, to be able to avoid drugs and alcohol my whole life, is because of that. Because there were expectations about behavior. Now, did I see a few Playboy magazines when I was 15? Yes, I did. It had nothing to do with any adult males showing it to me either. But there were certain expectations that if you got caught doing that, there'd be big trouble. There wouldn't be my parents hunting down who allowed it to happen. All of the focus would have been on me and my misbehavior. So when I look at Alisa, certainly bad. These guys are horrible, horrible, horrible. But if we keep giving outs to 15-year-olds like Alisa Petrov, we're just going to get more 15-year-olds like Alisa Petrov who have ideas about running away and doing this and doing that and everything else and putting themselves into even more danger. This is what I mean by realistically versus legally. Legally, they get out of this stuff. And they shouldn't be involved in this stuff. And adults should not be, luring them online and talking to them online and everything else. But realistically, we have to realize that 15-year-olds are interested in this stuff. And if we treat it realistically, this is what's going to cut down on these kinds of disappearances. I believe that. So the big question is, and this brings us to number 3, what to do now? This is not an easy question to answer given the public information. My main concern is that at some point after she left Salt Lake City, did it hit Alisa that what she was doing was wrong or very complicated? She didn't have an overall plan. This is actually a bigger concern to me than if Alisa actually met any adults. And yes, I mean this. We have to realize that cyber extortion is something that's real. And we know of many young people who have been fooled, been lured, to saying things, to doing things that the person on the other end said would not be made public, and then that person turns right around and says, if you don't do this, I'm going to make this all public. And there have been teenagers who have committed suicide because of this. Guess what? A lot of adults have had that happen to them as well. It's not just a teenager thing. Difference here, though, is it's clear that Alisa knew exactly who she was talking to. I'm not saying she knew these guys' real names, but she knew that these people were not teenagers, but were fellow adults. Maybe could not have thought so forward to the idea that she might get extorted because of this, but I don't think adults do that either. Once again, I don't think this is a teenager thing. And now here we are on June 1st, and it is public. Now, if she sent any pictures to him, I don't even want to think about that stuff. Because it is, once again, as an adult, this is a very touchy subject. It's very disgusting to me and everything else. But it very well may be that she sent pictures to them and those guys sent them to a bunch of people and she found out. To me, that is much more of a concern than her actually going to meet some adult somewhere. Now, I realize that means that, well, hey, Ed, she goes to meet some adult somewhere, she could be murdered. That's true. That's true. But we also have to realize that there's a lot of teenagers and adults who are harming themselves because of stuff like this as well. It's a statistically significant number as well. The problems we have is that we're 45 days into this, and it seems to me that all of the bad adults have been identified, those 3 guys. They seemingly have the communications that Alisa was making with everyone. And at least at this point, none of them have been proven to be in Provo on the day that she was, on April 21st of 2025. But she's still missing. Likewise, the problem is 45 days in, I just don't think that there are any more computer secrets to be found. And on a side note, I saw where her family's thinking about hiring a private investigator. If somebody could pass this along to Alisa's family, don't do that. Do not do that. Do not spend the money on that. Do not do that. It's a waste of money. Could Alisa be locked in a dungeon somewhere? Unlikely. Could there be some other guy still not identified? Possible, but then we have to start thinking, well, how has this person been able to cover his tracks when all these other guys could not? It's a little hard to understand. Not impossible, but a little hard to understand. Could have Alisa figured things out? And could she be out there living on the streets for the last 45 days, figuring things out one way or the other? This is probably more likely than people would believe. This is once again getting back to, in some ways, not in all ways, but in some ways that we should be thinking about 15-year-olds as young adults instead of children. They have, in most respects, 15-year-olds are more like adults, like 30-year-olds, than they are like 5-year-olds. Like I said, legally, I'm totally fine with the laws we have regarding children and contracts, children and sex and all that. Totally fine by me. I think that makes all the sense in the world. But realistically, we have to realize 15-year-olds are capable of doing a lot of things, taking care of themselves. And what's most probably important to me about this entire disappearance is the point that Alisa said, I'm running away. She told friends of hers, I'm running away. Meaning, I guess her idea was that even if she met those guys and survived, she wasn't coming back to Salt Lake City, Utah. She was not coming back to her parents. So this is not something where, as we usually think about these types of situations, where child gets lured somewhere, the child thinks, well, I'm going to meet another 15-year-old in a park somewhere, and then I'm going to do this, do that, and then I'm going to come home. And instead it's an adult, and the child, 15-year-old, 10-year-old, whoever, gets abducted. It sounds to me like whether Alisa met any of these guys or anybody or not, her idea was to not come back. And of course, being that she left school, she knew her parents were going to find out that she didn't go to the school that day, that she was headed out of town, that she knew they'd eventually find out she's not coming home that day. This is probably the point we need to remember the most. That the idea was to run away. This was not a rendezvous, then come home. Now, did she think if she met one of these guys or all these guys that she was going to be in a relationship with one of them? Or, what was going to happen from there? I just don't think the public information is complete enough to say. Maybe it never was stated in any of the communications she had with any of these guys. But she didn't say, I'm going to meet some guy and I'll be back on Monday to her friends. She said she was running away. And as I know, as scary as some people might think that is, I actually think this gives us hope that Alisa Petrov is still alive out there somewhere. And I'm not saying something horrible didn't happen to her since then, of a sexual nature, of a rape nature. But given that she used the words running away, gives me hope that she's still alive, she can be found alive, and that she can get her life back on track with the help of some good adults. It also leads me to believe that it's going back to why I don't cover these types of disappearances for the podcast. It also might make me believe that there were things going on in her house that she didn't like. Now, granted, it very well may be that the parents were trying to be good parents and she was resisting. We have to look at this through the eyes of a 15-year-old. But we also might be open to the idea that there were actually truly bad things going on in that house that she was trying to escape. There's no facts to support that. I want to state for the record, but she's the one who said she was running away. And that's my coverage of the disappearance of Alisa Petrov. Did she make it to Vegas? I don't know. Is she still in Provo? I don't know. I think there are many, many good reasons to believe that she is still alive. Of course, there are some reasons to believe that she might not be if she ran into the wrong adult. But as long as I think that in her mind she was running away, that gives me hope that she's still alive out there. But really, at this point, 45 days in, she could be anywhere. That is this episode of Unfound Now. Thank you for listening. Please give this video a thumbs up, and I'll talk to you again next month.